We'll see if anybody signs up. I wonder if we should we crack that door?
Yeah.
Maybe I should put a bucket.
I rang the doorbell a couple times.
Did you? I didn't even hear it. All right. So we're gonna use the teacher room over here. It's about as quiet as you'll find this school. So I'm gonna set that there. Anywhere you'd like, yeah. Ugh. Oh, that's not gonna work. I see a couple people signed on. If you're a St. Dom's people, we are having a little meeting regarding information for sacramental preparation for sacraments for kiddos. So, and if you're not from St. Dominic Academy, you can be entertained, I guess. So, why don't we, we'll begin with a little prayer. Does that work? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, as we celebrate Easter, we thank you for the gift of new life. We ask that you help us to be confident in your presence among us and hopeful about the future. And we ask all these things through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Spirit. Amen. So, if you don't mind, real quick, just maybe a little introductions. Would that be all right? So, we'll start with you.
Mark Childs, Bill Child, Mark Child's son.
Awesome.
Just to clarify, I'm Marcia, and I'm Mark Child's mother, if that helps clarify who he is.
Cool.
I'm Dylan. My daughter is Juliana. She's in Mrs. Williams' second grade class.
Yeah, great. Good.
And I'm Jen. This is my daughter Madeline. She's in Mrs. Williams' class. And Everett is in kindergarten.
Yes,
In Miss
so that
Williams'
name
class.
sounds familiar,
Yes.
so yes. Mark's in kindergarten as well.
Yes, that's right.
Cool. Well, I don't know, we can't really do introductions with you online, but we have, I don't know, 8 people on there now. Or 7, 6, no. So I'm Father Seamus, the chaplain here, and my purpose, just one of the things that I've found is that many times the connection between our families and the local parishes has not been the easiest to facilitate, or sometimes those connections just don't happen very well. And also I think sometimes there's not as much, just there are a lot of questions or expectations, or just some of the people don't really know what to ask or how to connect with parishes, and just what's involved. And I wanted to make sure that I can be as supportive to all of you, and just helpful in terms of really living out your faith and connecting with the Catholic community here in Lewiston Auburn. So, and it's interesting, what I've found too is that I struggle to try and figure it out. Like, I sent out that email regarding sacramental preparation, so I got like 20 of our students who are in different places, and so then I was like immediately overwhelmed. So I was like, how do I figure this all out? Because every kid is in a different place, and trying to connect to the church as well, and making sure, for me, Like there are a couple of very foundational principles for me. One is if someone comes to me or to the church asking for a sacrament, God has been involved in that somewhere. People don't ask for sacraments just out of the blue. That the Holy Spirit is at work. And so my job is to get out of the way and not be an obstacle, and also to try and, as much as I can, facilitate that connection, that person is seeking God, and then to try and see what I can do to help. So that's my kind of one basic principle. And then also that when I was a baby, my parents had both fallen away from the practice of the faith, and they approached a local parish priest to inquire about having me baptized, and he refused because they weren't practicing the faith. But they ended up going to to the Jesuit chaplain at the university, Gonzaga University in Washington State at the time, and he agreed to baptize me. And so I think part of it was that he could see that even though my parents weren't exactly sure about where they were at, that they were moving in the right direction, and he was willing to just to work with that. They didn't have to be 100% where they were going to be, but as long as they were trying to move in the right direction. And I think that's, so for me, that approach is personal. It's not just a theoretical thing from some class in the seminary. So, this, obviously the challenge for when you've got kids that are this age, they don't make major life decisions on their own. And so you as parents you speak on behalf of your children all the time. You advocate for them. You decide that they would come to this school. You decide what they're going to eat. You decide what they're going to do in the summers. You decide make you brush your teeth. Stuff like that, right? You decide what's good for your children and what's important to them. And so as much as I think sometimes in a school, I think probably your experience, hopefully part of what you've experienced is that your children coming to this school have had a positive experience of faith. That's, one of my hopes is that they can see prayer and just our Catholic traditions and our Catholic life as a blessing and not a burden. And that's something that they hopefully see enriches their life and makes it more interesting and more connected, and adds further dimension, a spiritual dimension to the way that they understand the world and themselves and their connections to other people. So I know that in some cases the kids are the ones chomping at the bit. I've had kids who are, in some cases we've had students whose parents were really not willing to pursue their receiving sacraments, and so we've had conversations like, well, you have to respect your parents' wishes at this point, and maybe at some point when you get older, you can make some decisions about how you want to live your life. But right now, that's another, maybe, if you want, a third principle is we have absolute respect for the role of the parent. And the last thing I would do is undermine your role in your children's lives. Like, you're the primary and most critical influence and all kinds of other things on your children. So I would never want to do anything that would be contrary to what you're trying to do in your home. So I think, part of the piece with just seeking sacraments at this stage with your children who are young is, it does involve a certain amount of commitment and initiative, decision on your own behalf, on your own part. And some of that, I think, like I look at my parents started practicing their faith when I was 5. And in many ways, they had both grown up Catholic, but they had drifted away for a while. I think my dad had been divorced, so it took him a while to kind of come back. And but in many ways, they kind of grew in the faith as I was growing in it. And we walked kind of together, and we kind of grew together, and it was something that was really something we shared, and still do. So I don't know where you're coming from as far as your own background. I've learned not to presume anything. Also, especially with COVID, nobody's been practicing going to church on Sunday this past year, or very few people have been able to. So, but what I do want to just encourage you, just right at the outset, is to really, the most important way to help your children to deepen their faith is to deepen your own faith. I mean, you can teach your children how to say certain prayers, but they will be, I think, much more influenced if they see you praying. I think of like watching my dad shave, or like think about things that your parents did that you kind of saw as like grown-up things, like, and that you were invited into, but you saw them as kind of, you just saw them as something that was integral to your parents' life. And I think that's, if we want to look at, we have to admit, I think, in the church, we've done a really crappy job handing on our faith. If you look at the last 50 years in the Catholic Church, we have done a really bad job. I think all of us, I don't know if you look at your peers, how many who are raised Catholic are going to Mass? Not many. And I think, and it's the same with me when and I think part of that is that we forgot how to hand on faith. So if we're going to hand on faith to our children, we have to do something a little bit different. And it can't be just do these things so you don't go to hell. I think sometimes there was this kind of inoculation with sacraments. It was almost like the vaccine against hell. It's like get your Holy Communion, get your baptism, get these things, and that'll keep you from going to hell. Instead of seeing them as really what we call them sacraments of initiation. They're supposed to initiate you, draw you into a life that's walked with God. And and I think that is the real hope is how do we help our children learn how to walk with God? And that means that, first of all, we have to try and make that as much of a priority as we can, and for all our failings. We're all gonna have failings in that regard. But so I just want to encourage you to prioritize your own faith. And I say that to myself too. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden when you're ordained, all of a sudden you just naturally start praying all the time. It's a constant effort, especially in our world today, to just take time to pay attention to the spiritual life. So that's just kind of a basic, maybe, I hope it doesn't sound like patronizing or like I'm lecturing you or anything, or I'm not, like, but I just find like, part of it I would say is there's no way this school can, like, you're essential to, like, your children will not continue to walk in the faith without your example. They won't. We can do some, but I just can't, like, I tell the teachers all the time, like, I cannot be the only Catholic identity in the school. We have to do it together. And we have to try and walk with God together. I just can't even do it alone. Like, just, so we have to help each other. And I think that's a fundamental Christian insight. I mean, Jesus brought community together. He didn't just go find individual people. He brought people together to follow him. Because we cannot do it on our own. So, I hope that you're able to really try and, like, really, I would encourage you to really work to find a place in the Catholic community in Lewiston, Auburn. I was talking to a school family a little while back, and they were saying they walked into a church, I won't say which one, and with their kids who were little, and they walked in and it was just, they got looks because their kids were kind of rambunctious, and they just were not really received very well, and it was just a really not a very positive experience. And so they ended up kind of falling, they had both been raised Catholic, but they just didn't really feel like they had the wherewithal to endure that. And they ended up going to some other Protestant churches and just trying to kind of still maintain some kind of spiritual connection. But we ended up circling, we connected, and I was talking with them about it. And I think they had really, partly the kids had really also expressed like a desire to receive the sacraments. And so we were talking about it. And I said, think about if there was one family that day you walked into church, just one, that had been there and had been friendly and had greeted you and like tried to connect with you and just have a decent interaction. Like, that would have made all the difference. And so we need people to kind of do that, like to be that family. And then one of the things I said is maybe 3 years ago you couldn't be that family, you weren't in a place where you could, but maybe you are now. Like, that you have enough wherewithal to endure a certain amount of misery, and maybe it's crappy music, or maybe the homily is just boring, or whatever it is, but you have enough to handle that, to be there for another family. And I think that's the only way we're going to grow, like, and help to sustain a community of faith. So I want to encourage you to, you've got a certain amount of resources in our school. Hopefully you feel that support here. But I think we really could, the local parishes here, they really could use our support and our families and the vitality of our kids. So if we're able to work to contribute that to the local community, I think that would be a precious contribution to the local churches here. Especially to a lot of our older Catholic community who are just sad because they go to Mass on Sunday and they don't see any kids, or very few. So, anyhow, you're going to get a homily and a half here. Anyhow, those are some thoughts. Maybe they seem somewhat rambling, but I'd like to just kind of open as far as maybe some very practical things for sacramental preparation. if we look at kind of baptism is the gateway to all the sacraments. It's the first sacrament, and so for those who have been baptized, and actually we as long as someone is baptized in the Trinitarian, so a Christian baptism as instructed by Jesus in Matthew's gospel, go baptize all nations in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. As long as it's a Christian baptism, then we acknowledge it. So somebody could have been baptized in any Christian church. They don't even need to be baptized by a Christian. It could be, interestingly, a Jewish person can baptize a Catholic baby. In fact, like Jewish nurses in Catholic hospitals were trained in danger of death how to baptize a Catholic infant. And as long as they intend what the church intends, we really believe God is at work in that. I think that, that's one area we recognize baptism kind of across the board. Usually it's there are a few things that would make it questionable, but I remember one person I had, she had been baptized in an evangelical church, and they did like this WWF wrestling baptism thing, and the minister was like dressed up like a wrestler and slam dunked you into the baptismal font and this whole thing, and I was like, I don't know. But I think it ended up being valid because it was the right, even though it was goofy, we still was like, oh, God can work through all kinds of things, even if it's a little goofy. So, if there's any question, if you have children who you're not sure, if a child is baptized in the name of Jesus, so that can be sometimes it's a question mark, so it's not according to the formula, or if a different person pours the water than the person saying, I baptize you, that can be a problem as far as kind of how we understand the Holy Spirit to be at work. So there are a couple, they're just, and I don't know, so this is one of the things moving forward with sacraments, is we try and get a record of baptism. And that's the first piece. And that is really safeguarded by the church. So when you're baptized, that baptism is recorded in the church of the baptism. And every other sacrament is recorded in that church. So I went to Spokane, Washington to visit some friends, and I checked in my baptismal record in that little chapel at Gonzaga University. It has now all of the notations from all the sacraments I received, like First Communion, Confirmation, Ordination. Even in Rome, they have to send notification back to the church of my baptism. And it's that way for if you were baptized in a Catholic church, every sacrament you received, your marriage, everything, is recorded in the church of your baptism. That's where we document the sacrament. So that's why kind of a first piece when you're preparing a child for baptism or for other sacraments is to find out, we need documentation of where the baptism was so we can send notice of any further sacraments to that church. And that is all kept within the parish community, right? We don't keep baptismal records in the school. So that's within the parish offices.
About baptism, which is kind of why we're here as well. I'd like to get them both baptized.
Yeah.
We're having a problem with the godparent, getting a godparent.
Same. Juliana's not baptized yet either.
No.
And she came
So
home
she
from
can't
school
receive her other
and-
sacraments until she gets baptized. And
Yep.
Everett wants to be baptized as well.
And I've missed some time.
I know you have, I know. But finding godparents under everything they want for a godparent is proving difficult in our family.
Yeah.
Because nobody is Catholic except our immediate group.
And I'll be honest, that's why my son isn't baptized,
Yeah.
because I went to be a godparent for my nephew years ago, and I was not allowed, so I was
Yeah.
like, if I'm not allowed to be a godparent, are they gonna consider me good enough to be a parent? And so therefore, that's why Mark was never baptized.
And the godparents of my oldest, Isabel, they wanted to be the godparents of my youngest, and for no other words, they weren't accepted. They couldn't, and I'm like, but they're already godparents of Izzy, so
That's great.
I
I mean,
got
I
a little
actually,
stumped, and I
yeah.
gave up, and I was like, you know what, they go to school here, they go to church every week, I'm gonna just,
Well, great. Thank you. 'Cause that's a challenge. So I think, one of the pieces is there are kind of two kind of understandings of godparents. I think one, in the past, it used to be much more secular, like even within, like if you went to, like your godparent was more of almost like, they had even financial responsibility. Some of the people, like if your parents died, your godparent was the one that you would be assumed would take you in. And so there was a lot more that was tied into, it really wasn't so much about the person being somebody who was a guide or mentor in the spiritual life as it was more of a family and secular kind of understanding of it. And I think that there has been a change. And part of it is because we realized we weren't handing on the faith to our, we're just not handing the faith on. And so some things need to change. And what I would say is, if you're the only religious figures in your child's life, that's a lot of pressure on you, isn't it? I mean, we're all going to fail.
well, the thing is, they do have great-grandparents and grandparents that do go to church. I mean, her great-grandparents, they go to I think it's the Baptist church is what it is on Elizabeth Street. And then another grandparent that actually goes to church here. I mean, and then the other grandparents, they've gone through all their sacraments, but they don't go to church every week anymore. So, I mean, so they, they're part of the faith and everything, and, they've been baptized and what have you. But when we try to, fill out the paperwork for godparents, they're like, they wanted letters from the church that they go to, and like
Right.
a lot more stuff, and it's like, well, no, and
It seems a high threshold.
yeah, I mean, and it's like, they want to be their godparents, they understand what, it is to be godparents, and one of them was my oldest sponsor, and now wants to be a godparent for her. So I guess I don't understand why it's so difficult to.
So,
get
yeah,
them back.
I mean, I think that,
They come here, we send them here because it is, St. John's, and they're getting their Catholic education here as well.
yeah.
That it's not just me saying prayers with them, they're seeing the entire, spectrum.
I guess what I would just say is that, so there is the ability, so for a non-Catholic to be like a religious mentor in the role of a godparent, we do have we call it
They were baptized Catholic, they still are, but.
so,
because
but
they're not
yeah, so
attending-
that, well, but this, I mean, part of it is, again,
They still believe, they still know what our beliefs are, what her beliefs are, it's the same for them, and,
well,
but,
kind of, but do they believe in the Eucharist?
yes,
Well, then, but they're not receiving the Eucharist in the church
No.
they're going to.
no, they're not, but,
I mean, so this is part of it for me is like, now I'm not, and I don't want to get into this public, because obviously these are personal things, but part of it is that if we're, when you're looking at a godparent, it's someone who can hand on the Catholic faith that the person who's receiving their first Holy Communion and confirmation is beginning.
okay,
So,
then
like,
my
if-
question is, what do I use then?
I feel like
Or do
that's
they
the
just
problem,
not have
right?
it?
We haven't been handing on faith, so now
We're
our
trying to.
children are being punished and not able to do the things that they
I
want
mean,
to
she's
do.
8 years old
Because
now.
there's nobody
Because-
around who can can fulfill that.
I hear you. I think you're right. I mean, I think it's a real
And they're
challenge,
stepping
right?
up, and they're trying to, they're like, they want
But I
to,
think part of it is this.
and they're like being.
Well, it's not, look, it's not the people that you're thinking of, it's not a question of their holiness of life, or it's not a judgment on them and their moral standing. Okay? That's not, it's really more a matter of, like if you had, if your child wanted to play a sport and you were going to have them being coached, the coach has to, if they don't believe that it's the same rules and they're not going to hand on the same sport, if you want your child to learn baseball, you don't go find a softball coach. You've got, ultimately, they can't hand on what they don't have. And so this is part of the thing is, if you try and choose a godparent who's not on board with what the life of the church is, how are they going to hand that on?
But I'm saying that they are, they're just doing it in their own.
Well, but they're not doing it, if they're not.
Okay, then my next question is, I've got nobody to choose from, so does she just not have godparents? Can she still be baptized?
Well, what I would say is,
she wants to be.
right, so what I would say is, you probably have people that you may not have considered. There may be teachers in the school. There may be other parents in the school. There may be other people who are connected to you who are, maybe they're not as close to you. This is the challenge, right? Is that maybe those that you're closest to are not the ones who are living the Catholic faith. It's not a huge, it's just basically, are they going to Mass on Sunday? We're not talking about are they saying the rosary every day. It's just, are they going to Mass on Sunday? And so I think, I don't underestimate the challenge there, but I do think we also have to be realistic about, if you consider down the road the chances of your children continuing to receive the Eucharist and go to Mass every week, if they don't have that example from their godparents, and they don't, and if it's something that you struggle with as well, is that going to even last beyond their time here? We have to be clear-eyed about what we're doing. And what this is. It's, we really believe that the Eucharist is the presence of Christ among us. And I do think that this is where it does challenge it's challenging you as well, right? But I think part of it is to just ask, well, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ from a Catholic perspective? You cannot separate that from the Eucharist.
I guess I'm just not sure how it makes sense to find, I'm just going to say, a random teacher. I don't know who is eligible or not, versus grandparents that you see for the rest of your life. We're just going to pick a random staff member that we think is going to
qualify.
fit. Right, because
they meet criteria.
on paper it says that they're okay, But
It's not that they randomly qualify,
is my
is
daughter
it?
going to continue to have a relationship
But
with
look-
them outside of school?
But your daughter is going to have a relationship with her grandparents.
Exactly the point.
Okay,
That's what I'm
so,
saying,
but that is not necessarily going to be a relationship that leads them, if your grandparent, or whoever it is, if they're not practicing their faith, then that relationship isn't necessarily going to lead them closer to their practicing of the faith, will it?
But they're also going to be grown individuals and can make those choices on their own, and
But that's
we-
part of the choice that you're making now, right?
that we're trying to make for them and just running into walls no matter what road you go down.
Well, I think it's really a matter of authenticity, though. It's like, what are you really choosing here?
I'm choosing somebody that does believe in the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, who loves my children, and will see that they will be able to continue practice, will be able to do what they also choose to do. Like I said, I mean, they go to this school for a reason, and everybody in my family understands that, and they support it. You know, and her great grandparents do go to church every week. You know, her other grandfather does not, but that's his choice but he still believes, you know, I mean, he doesn't, it just mystifies me that, you know, that, well, because this couple goes to church every week and, you know, they receive the Eucharist, that they're better than somebody that,
That's not what's being
well,
said.
that's kind of what it sounds like.
I've got a
That it's
question.
better than someone who loves her and will help her.
But
And
no,
teach
it's
her
again,
and
like so for example, I don't know if you have a family member who, you know, I'm sure your parents may love your children a lot, but if they don't play the piano, if you're trying to find a person to teach your child the piano, you go find a piano player.
But isn't that why we have the school too? And I know the school isn't going to be around
But
for
the
forever.
school is not,
But-
that's a specific role of a godparent, right? What's the role of a godparent?
To continue on in the faith. So say something happened to me, I would want them to be continued to be brought up Catholic. That is what, because that's what he's chosen, and he's 6 and he can't do it on his own. He's going to need somebody to help him. And whoever I chose, I would know that regardless of what they are doing currently, that
Yes.
they would continue bringing them up in the Catholic religion. That's my expectation of them as a godparent.
Well, how can you hand on something you don't
But
you don't
I've got-
know?
I've got-
Like, I don't know how that would even work.
I've got a question. What do you guys do with children that come here that aren't Catholic? Maybe if they're Baptist, are they still allowed to practice their religion?
Oh, sure.
Because that's a totally different religion than Catholic.
So my whole reason for wanting to do this
Sure.
is because it is exactly what she is saying right now. I want him to be able to participate, and I don't feel like I want him to get baptized now so that next year when he has his first communion, he'll be able to do that along with his peers. And
Okay,
it's not, and
right.
it's something he
Right.
wants. I've talked to him about it, and yes, he doesn't have the full knowledge of
Right.
he's 6.
Right.
But he thrives on he looks forward to not only his math and his reading
To
and
go into church.
Yes.
They talk about
Very
it.
happy.
they talk about it. And so
They
he's
know
thriving on it. So I want, if he wants it, I want it for him. And even if I didn't, I would want him, if he came to you at 10 years old, and I know you said that the parents are the thing, but we want this for our children. So if he's, I guess I'm having a hard time saying it, but I just feel like she said that regardless of what we have for people for him, I would want him to be accepted, kind of like you said with those children and that family going into that church. I would want him to feel accepted if he wants this, regardless of what.
I don't think we're
If we
talking
can't
about,
meet all the
this is not about accepting. That's not,
Well,
we're talking about a
but
specific,
They're not being accepted as godparents.
no, we're talking about a specific role,
Okay.
okay, that is,
But then when I said, who do I choose for godparents, and you said to look at, you know, other people, but it's like,
I'm saying, look at people who are
but I don't
role
know
models
that as
in
well.
living their Catholic faith.
That's, okay. So, again, we're going in a circle because they go to church every week. They're going to be better godparents to my children, even though they're not close friends. We don't see each other every week. We don't talk every day. You know,
See, I
how-
think that this is part of what I had said earlier about understanding the role of a godparent.
I think a godparent is someone who loves my children and will help them live.
That's
as
all
God's
kinds, I
children.
hope that that's all kinds of adults in your child's life.
Not every person will want them to be God's children. You
Right,
know,
only some, and some of those will want it in specific ways. But you're going to have all kinds of different adults that are part of your children's lives. What I'm saying is this: the role of the godparent is to specifically help hand on the Catholic faith to your child. That's their role. So when you're trying to choose a godparent, you want to find someone who can hand on the Catholic faith to your child as clearly and robustly and beautifully as possible.
even if it's almost a stranger.
Even if it's almost a stranger, because you know what? They connect very well with their teachers over time. They learn an awful lot from their teachers, and they were strangers when they started the year. I think part of it is maybe just we have different, you have an operating definition of what you think a godparent is. And what I'm saying is, I think that role, whatever you have in mind for a godparent, is like a really important thing. But it's different from what the church understands a godparent to be. And I'm not saying that you should deprive all those other people from having beautiful, loving relationships with your children. More the better. But I'm saying you should add one more. Add another set of people. It's not a matter of saying subtract. I'm not saying subtract anything. Okay? That's not what's being asked. It's not a matter of subtracting. It's not a matter of denying. It's a matter of saying, this is a... No, it's
denying them the role to be a godparent.
They have decided, though, by their own decisions about how they want to live. I mean, like...
So praying at home means nothing? You have to be in church?
I mean, we can get into the theology of the Eucharist.
Okay, well, then we can. I mean, for the past year, nobody's been in church, so, you know, what about that? It's like, it doesn't make you a bad person if you don't go, and you still believe in God, and you still pray, and you, I mean,
I wasn't able to be a godparent because I didn't get married in a church.
Right, we have
Yeah.
a couple of people who are both baptized and received all of their sacraments as children, and because they didn't get married in a church, we're not allowed to be godparents.
Yeah, I know. That's another one.
But you can be unmarried and that's okay.
As long as you don't live together.
Depending,
You
yeah.
don't cohabitate, right?
Right.
I've talked to Lisa Daigle about this for like the last 6 months of my life, picking apart every word in this silly little sponsor form,
yeah.
trying to
that's-
figure out like, okay, well, we have these people, and so then you're telling me that like somebody on paper who is single, but I mean, no offense to anybody, lives with his parents in their basement, is a recovering alcoholic, but goes to church every Sunday, is a better godparent on paper for my child than these two who also go to church every Sunday and are baptized and married, but they didn't get married in a church. So they can't fill that role, but this other person could, in theory, because they qualify on paper and check all the boxes.
It's not so much checking the
It
boxes.
feels very
But it is, because
judgmental.
all they're looking at in the parish is that piece of paper. That piece of paper wasn't filled out to their satisfaction. These people don't qualify, they can't be it.
Well,
Because
That's all they say, that's all
to
we
qualify.
say.
I
Because
know
I
my
know
first marriage
they're not
adult.
qualified, they're not
And then I
qualified.
I think-
I think,
look.
So I'm
As
just
far as
trying
what's
to-
clear to me is that it sounds like you've all been talking to Lisa. Well, however the conversations with Lisa have unfolded, what I would say is the form is not, the form is there as a, these are not, the form is not the thing that's preventing this. It's not a form, and it's not, I mean, I understand how it can look arbitrary. I think, again, part of this is understanding what a godparent is and is not. To be a godparent is not, we're not canonizing someone.
And see what other parents of these children are
That
qualified as godparents, and then ask.
But you
them.
could come in already
Maybe
baptized by whatever
Yeah.
rules happen in another religion and then proceed, which doesn't make any sense to me.
But that's what I was asking, like, if a child comes in and they're baptized, like say they were Baptist, and they wanted to try to, like with Mark, and all his other peers being Catholic, but if he was already baptized,
Of course.
you know,
Straight
and bring God into our house and into our lives, so that he doesn't feel like he's left out. Even though
I think part of this is, it's understanding, I mean, look, part of this is,
there's so many different religions out there.
I get it, but I think that the key is to understand what your children are at an age where the burden falls on the parents more about, to understand really what is being requested. And if, I'm not, it's to understand what it is. And some of this is just,
But asking,
I don't want to create thresholds that are.
Friendly with, okay, so you ask another couple that you're friendly with, that's fine, they meet the criteria, they can be the godparents. Well, people move, people leave, lose touch, so how does that help her, how does that help teach her more about it? Because you're saying that godparents help them spiritually and teach them throughout their life. Well, they just moved. He got a job somewhere, he's gone, you lose touch because they're only friends. Okay, relatives are with you forever, and they're close by, that's what I'm trying to say when you said find other people, but it's like,
Look, I guess my first thought would be, I agree. I agree that the ideal would be somebody where there's continuity of relationship. I agree. My grandmother was my godmother until she passed away. And I understand, I've got a bunch of nieces and nephews who I'm their godfather. Okay? I get it.
And then adopt some more children as their godfather.
But I do understand, I get your frustration.
and now she's missing sacraments because this has been going on for like 2 years.
So,
Because-
but part of it is I want to try and this is why I'm here, right? Is to try and figure out how do we do this. These are not, they're not, I don't have control over some of this or any of it.
Which I know
So-
we can't change the rules.
It's
But
not even, we can't even
I
change,
know-
like this is like in canon law, so it's like, it's not even, this is the universal church across, like, if you were in Botswana, this would be the same criteria. So it's not something that, I know it feels arbitrary. I don't want it to feel arbitrary or like an indictment or an indictment on the moral standing of your relatives. That's not what this is meant to be. I mean, frankly, the church does not envision we change slowly, and there's not been this kind of falling away from the faith. That you would struggle to find a godparent who is going to church on Sunday
Well,
is just not.
we're trying to add people to the church.
I know,
You
and so part of this
and
is.
it's being really, and it's really hard.
I agree. I've found that with this whole process is I've been like, I get it. I get why this doesn't happen because it's really hard. And I mean, that's what we're finding in this discussion. It's like, and I understand that. Maybe I think part of it is, this is why I think as a school community, if we can, I mean, maybe like, all that I guess I feel like is it would be a real shame if these kinds of things kept our students from receiving the sacraments. So my whole thing is, like, I'm just trying, for me, it's like, yeah, so I'm like, okay, we're a group of people who are not stupid. Like, how do we figure this out?
So
I cannot change the thing. It's not a matter of an arbitrary form. Like, these are not things that I can just change.
Okay, so what's our next step of getting them baptized though? I mean,
So
just
try
someone to step in and be their godparent to,
It's to try I mean, part of it is this, like you mentioned, grandparents. I don't know why weren't your parents qualified?
they're divorced.
Are they remarried?
One is not in the church. Originally, they were married in the church, my parents, and now they're not. I'm married. My mother's remarried. My dad is not remarried. My father is the godfather of my oldest daughter.
Yep, he could be the godfather again.
Well, it's whomever I spoke with, I'm not sure who he was in the office down there, said that he couldn't be. My dad hasn't been up here in almost 2 years because, again, COVID, he hasn't been up since 2019.
And I'm sorry if I don't mean to, like, I don't know if you even want to talk about this. I'm like, because I know these are personal things. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, this is part of it for me. It's like, I want to make sure you're hearing the right.
And her son is with my son, so we're all.
Okay, I just want to make sure that,
The correct godparents.
because I'm sensitive to the fact that I don't want to be like getting into things that where you're not. But I would say, like,
But I don't know why my dad, you're saying he doesn't,
look,
he doesn't go to church every week, but he's, so and that's why.
if a person, so what's the requirement of the church? Is that the person needs, and this again is not something I've made up, it's just the universal requirement across, if you're in Hungary.
But why
or-
was he able to be my daughter's godfather? He didn't have to fill out that paper, he didn't need a letter from the church that he attends in Florida, he didn't need any of that, just a few years ago.
I am not sure, but all I do know is that what the church asks hasn't changed. So whether they just decided not to pay attention, I don't know. But what has been asked of godparents is this, for as long as I know, it's that they have to be over 16, that they need to be confirmed, that they need to be practicing their faith, and that means that they shouldn't be living in a way that directly rejects or, so for example, are they going to Mass every single Sunday? Well, hopefully they're trying. Is it like, if your dad's trying to go to, if it's not, as long as he hasn't directly and notoriously said, I don't believe any of this junk. But I mean, again, it's like, how's he, you have to believe something to hand it on, right? I mean, so some of this is just, it has to be authentic to say, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be the Catholic godparent of this person, then you need to be somebody who is trying to be a Catholic. So whether you're perfect, you don't have to be a perfect Catholic, you just have to be trying to be Catholic.
Does being Catholic have to mean that you accept everything that they're saying? Because like you said, you know, there are things that we think need to change even though we can't change them. So if I believe that I can pray directly to God and don't have to confess my sins to a priest, even if I want to bring up my son Catholic, I don't think that I have to believe in every single thing that Catholicism believes in order for me to bring up my son Catholic. I mean, I'm not going to tell him, I'm sorry, but I just, it's,
I think that, well, so there's a certain
I'm
threshold.
gonna tell him, I'm gonna teach him, I'm gonna correspond my teaching with what the school is teaching him. And I think that's why we have them go here. And I'm definitely not at 6 years old or even at any point, I don't plan on, you know, he's gonna make his own decisions. But
Well,
I
yeah,
don't
all of
think
us do at a certain
I
point.
think that the church could change, and it has changed over the years with certain things, and that it could change even more, so.
Sure, but there are certain things that are, so for example, if you look at the Nicene Creed, okay, the creed that we all say together every Sunday. If you don't believe the Nicene Creed, it would be it's hard, some of it's just, like, if you are against, I mean, and we're getting off topic. But I'd say if we're, and I do think that this is part of, like, because you are speaking on behalf of your child, right? And so look at the Nicene Creed, because this is not a production, and there is the danger of, it's not just a show, and this is not just a social club this is not the National Honor Society. This is about, what do I believe is true, right? If I didn't think that what the church teaches is true, not that I don't have my questions and doubts and wanderings and things like that, okay? But at least the creed. If I didn't think that was true, I'd be the first one out the door. Okay, it's not a show. And so I think there does need to be, this is not just a worldly institution. It's not about being part of, this happens to be my flavor of spirituality. It's about, what do I believe? Did God really enter into time and space in this person, Jesus Christ? Is what he said true about who God is? In what he taught, is that true? And what his apostles and disciples handed on, do I believe that's true? And if I do, and I want to be a follower of Christ as he handed that on to his disciples, and they handed it on, and it's an apostolic faith, right? We believe that there's the Holy Spirit accompanies the church through the apostles and their successors. So it's a matter of, it's not just, if we want to just have a religious kind of frosting on our earthly cake and just see the world the same way everyone else does, but just kind of put a little Catholic frosting on it, throw a few crucifixes up on the wall. But that's not really that's not what baptism is. Baptism it's profound. What does St. Paul say? It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. That we die to ourselves and rise to new life in Christ. It's about seeing the world differently. And being changed and converted and constantly being renewed. And it's not, we're never done. I'm just still learning, and I suck at following Jesus, but I'm trying. But I think, ultimately it has to do with like, what's the direction you're trying to go in? Like, and who do you see as guiding you? And do we look to the scriptures and to the traditions? Do we see this as a guide in our life, like how we make decisions? So, there has to be a certain amount of, I would say at least the creed. Do you have to believe that green is the best color for ordinary time and red is, no. There are things that are just, they change, but there are some things that don't. Jesus rose from the dead. If you don't believe Jesus rose from the dead, it's going to be hard to be a Christian. And I would say similarly, if we don't believe that Jesus is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, hard to be a Catholic. Confession is actually, I didn't make it up. Jesus said, whoever sins are forgiven, you forgive are forgiven. He said that to the apostles. And that's part of the creed.
Oh, I believe you need to ask for forgiveness. Absolutely.
Again, we can get down that rabbit hole.
Right.
And I would just say, I would just encourage you as well. We're all still learning. And there are some really great resources as far as continuing to try and deepen your own understanding of the Catholic faith. And,
just trying to, doing this for Mark, I've gotten more into it. I feel grown in my own self, but wanting it for him. And
the last thing I want to do is discourage you. Yeah, and I don't want to discourage, I think this is the challenge, right, is if we set a threshold that's like that you have to have studied in the seminary for 5 years in order to have your children baptized. That's...
Kind of feels like,
So it's not, I don't want you to be discouraged. But at the same time, we got to be realistic about, just because otherwise, you see the danger, right? Is that the danger is that if I'm on the outside looking in, and I see all these people who go and have their children baptized, and then they don't live any differently, and they don't see the world any differently, and nothing changes about them, then I say, this is just a joke.
What happens if 3/4 of the things change towards God and only a quarter get left behind?
Yeah, look, I'm not saying that we have to be even, hell, I'd be happy with I'm trying to get 25% out of myself.
Right.
I'm not saying we have to get there 100%.
Right.
But I'm saying that there is the danger. What is the church so often accused of? Hypocrisy.
Mhm.
Well, we don't want to add to that, do we?
Well, you're almost saying that because of the people that we choose aren't fitting that criteria, that's what's going to happen.
It's not, well, we're,
You're like, well, they're not going to teach them properly. They're not going to, live as a Catholic, and it's like, well, you're trying to see the future, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not, look,
primary-
I think you're right in the sense of look, every one of us could take a turn and end up off the deep end.
Right, so I don't know why they're being dismissed as a godparent just because of what might happen, or because of what they aren't doing, when they do believe and they want to be there for them, and they're being denied that as to be a godparent. So I know you can't change the rules, so I just need to know,
could you send a letter to
how can
To the
I
Pope.
get my baptized without, godparents, apparently?
No,
Right,
it's
I
not,
don't think it's possible, right? They can't get a sacrament without
well, and why would
a
you?
sponsor or something.
I don't think, I don't think that, well, my first thought would be this. Is there any way that we can work together to try to help the people that you would like and seem most logical to be the godparents, to try and figure out a way where they are not going to run into obstacles with their criteria.
Their biggest thing is going to church every week, and, you know, and that's what's stopping everything.
Well, let's see if they,
You know,
I mean,
but-
I'd see, like, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, he might not belong to church, but he came up here, he went to church with us, he still received the Eucharist, he'll go to church with us, and he still receives, but I mean, his name's not in the book, that he's there, he doesn't, that he's part of the parish or anything else, so it's like,
So
he
what,
has to belong somewhere and has
I
to
think,
go
I
there.
think we could make that work.
It's just, I don't know, it's just,
Look,
it's very frustrating that
look,
that
I,
happened. He came up 2 years ago and he's only here for a short time, so we tried to, do it while he was here.
well, I understand. It sounds like
So
there's a
that
lot
he
of
could
water
be
over the
God
dam.
here. He wanted to. It would break his heart to not be. And when he was told, they said,
Okay, so the thing for me is, like, let's try and figure out how we can do that.
and she's missing out to the retreats and her next sacraments because she's not baptized and she wants to be baptized. She's old enough to make the decision. She loves the school. She loves, what it is. And, in her mind, she's like, I'm not one of God's children. She's like, why am I baptized? Like, okay, let's just not get into that realm,
Yeah, I mean,
so.
yeah, we can get into. I think that, though, at a certain point, this is also about, this is where, like, if they had to choose colleges at their age, they'd choose the one that had the most candy. So we do have to make, there are things that they see and there are things that they don't. And that is why parents are asked to really be involved in making these decisions. It sounds to me like, some of this with the godparent thing, that's really an individual discussion that that basically I should probably have with each of you individually to we gotta get down to brass tacks. Okay, who do you want to be the godparents? Why is that not working? Is there any way around that? If that's not going to work, if they're just really not able to be the godparents, then what else? What are the other options that are available? But to have that discussion so that we can really move it forward. But that's the kind of discussion that we're going to really have kind of one-on-one.
Okay.
I think it is interesting to me that the godparent thing becomes kind of the hang-up point.
It was a little frustrating.
You really only need one. You don't need two. You need one. And, I think some of this is just trying to sift out and separate between there's a whole cultural thing of godparents. And that just may not be where I think that worked 50 years ago when everybody was going to mass together in the same town. That worked 50 years ago. But it doesn't work as well anymore. And so we're trying to navigate something that's not easy. Where you've got a whole lot of older relatives that are not actively living out their faith, or there have been marriage things that have gotten messy. Divorce was not a reality like it is today. And we've got to try and find a way to make sure that we're still handing on the faith to our children. And I don't know exactly where the compromises need to happen or can't. There are some things that it's really like, it's just hard to even, like, there's just not a lot I can do. But there are, ways that I think we can at least try and, we should at least exhaust every possible avenue.
That's where you think that the Catholic religion would look like when we first said when we came in here, how you guys are failing, how they can change. I know that they have a strict guideline they gotta follow. Other religions do it, and maybe bring in more people. Maybe the Catholic religion could do the same, to bring more people.
It's
Like
hard
you said,
because part of the challenge is that
there's more people going to mass, and more people.
It's
and the
tough,
world
though,
living
because
today is so hard.
it is hard. I think one of the challenges is that there's not, like it can go either way, right? We have been around for a couple thousand years because we're slow to change. Because sometimes cultures can go kind of crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultures on this planet. There's 8,000 cultures on this planet.
And I think there's a lot of reasons to be a little bit suspicious about where our culture is headed. And not to want to just follow it. So I think there's reason to be a little hesitant about just changing everything. So there is reason to
Just
be,
talking change a little bit.
well,
No,
but
just a little.
but there's a reason to be like, okay, well, and the church changes slowly and only after a long process of discernment. Because cultures do this kind of thing. Right? And so, now granted, it can be frustrating in one moment or another, but that's why there is, what we're supposed to do is try and care for each other through that and try and not have it just be, this is what the form says, but to try to make sure that we don't lose the individual people in the mix. Right?
Like
And
you said, if we could meet, so we can move forward, and,
yeah, I think the thing for me is like, the godparent question should, of all the things to get in the way,
yeah, and that's.
that should not be the thing to get in the way here.
Yeah.
That would not be, we need to figure out how to navigate that.
I can choose godparents, but if I wouldn't qualify to be one, that, I don't know, it's just, I have a hard time with that. Like, I can pick godparent, I have people in my family that do go to church every week, that I could pick to be his godparents. But if I'm not good enough.
It's not about good enough. It's not about good enough.
That's the way that I was made to feel. And that turned me off, and I feel like.
Well, so,
in the church,
all right, so let me
it's
just
not
like,
accepting.
okay, but look, you're always going to find people who do a crap job explaining things.
True.
So, like, they're not good enough. Okay? That's not what we're talking about.
It's those strict guidelines. you
But
guys
I don't
have.
think.
It's not even that- it's-
Was it your father?
the bigger thing is,
I
think
think he
about
wanted
it.
me to feel that.
Think
Yeah.
about it this way. It's like if you wanted to teach your child baseball and you had one family that went to the baseball field every Sunday and played baseball for 2 hours. And then you had another family that just they liked baseball, but they didn't go to the baseball field and play baseball every Sunday for 2 hours. And I said, you choose the family that's going to be handing on baseball.
Well, what if they weren't nice people, but the people who didn't know much about baseball were nicer people?
And
I'm just saying.
I get it, but you can see how part of it is there has to be some consideration to the question of whether this person is living out the faith that's being given to the child.
I guess what I'm saying is, even if I find these godparents, is the fact that he hasn't annulled his first marriage going to get in the way of us baptizing our son? Because
No.
No, because my husband's not baptized, he's not even Catholic.
That won't get in the way.
He's very, he just.
That won't get in the
steps
way.
back.
That won't get, look, I mean, part of this is, again, make a distinction between the role, right? The role of a godparent is specific. It's not that we're canonizing the person. It's not that we're saying that they're the closest person to your children or to you. It's we're saying they understand and are trying to live the Catholic faith. And are they living it perfectly? Nobody is. But that's what they're trying to do. And that's their job, is to be that model. You're going to have a lot of other people who might be better models of charity, of love, of acceptance, of all kinds of other things. And who are maybe even, who are going to have, like, I mean, I just think maybe part of this is, the role of a godparent's important, but it's not like, it's not meant to be the parent. You're the parent, and you have all kinds of other people who are involved in the lives of your children. Your godparent's a specific role related to the living of the Catholic faith. And so I think maybe some of this is just to not, I think it's gotten, in some ways it's gotten built up into more than it should be. More than it should be and less than it. It's just not. So I think some of this is just, there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of like how we're understanding the role of a godparent. And that's part of why I think it's important for that to have this discussion, is so that that you don't go away with this mistaken notion that it's somehow a criticism of people who, or saying that they're not as important, or that they don't have faith. But I do think at a certain point, the conversation about godparents is easier to have just in individual circumstances, because it does get pretty specific pretty quickly.
Yeah, because I think in today's world, any faith in God, this world we live in, is better than no faith.
I agree. And that's where I don't look. I appreciate that you're making the effort, and I want to make sure we don't get in the way of that.
Well, we are, like, when Mark comes home, we're, he's like right into Noah, and he's like, just this kind
No,
of
it's
spirit.
awesome. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be trying to do, right? And I love watching the kids. Just, they're curious and.
I mean, he teaches stuff that I've never even knew. Really?
Yeah, it's good stuff. So I mean, look, I think the thing is, if the godparent, it sounds like that's been the biggest obstacle. So let's get that sorted out.
Do you do the baptisms here?
I don't
I know
usually,
that's
I
a
can
good question,
do,
but I just don't know who.
so I'm actually filling in this weekend, I'm filling in at the Basilica, I'm baptizing 2 of our kids.
Okay.
We've got 2 that are being that have kind of gone through the process. And I would love to baptize our kids, because it's awesome. I think it's super, like, it would be a great celebration. And I know Father Dan Greenleaf, the pastor here, he's happy to let me at least,
Well, they know you.
they know me and I know
They,
them.
and they're very comfortable around you, and
Yeah.
so it's just.
So I'm happy, again, I'm happy to try and, but I think the main thing for me is, like, we've got to, like, whatever conversation's been happening with the parish, that's not been going well. So that is where we got to try and, like,
It just isn't going anywhere.
so we got to make that work.
Okay.
And I think part of that is, trying to empower you in terms of understanding why it's not just a form being thrust in front of you that is just like some administrative bureaucratic obstacle, and to understand kind of what's going on, but also at the same time, it probably is going to stretch you to where, like, there are some things the church is always stretching me. I'm being asked all the time to accept things that are not easy. And much of the time, that's been good for me. But the Catholic faith has never been the easiest faith. If I were going to invent a religion that I wanted to be easy, this would not be it. We hold up a crucifix for a reason. It's not, what Jesus taught was not easy. And there is a certain amount of just, also partly for me, is accepting that there's some certain things I'm just not going to understand everything about it. And ultimately, there's a God and it's not me.
That's what I get, there's so many religions and there's so many interpretations of the Bible that the main goal is that he existed and he walked this earth.
But there is authority, I think, and that's part of this. There is authority, and the problem is if you acknowledge every authority, you have no authority except yourself.
Right.
And so ultimately you have to, I think, make the best choice you can and say, okay, who do I think has it figured out the best? Now, do they have it figured out 100%? No.
Right, yeah.
But where do I think this is kind of most stable and okay? I may not get it all. It certainly isn't perfect. We're not in heaven yet. But I'm willing to bend where I can and to try and understand. So, I hope this has been helpful to you and not just like, I want you to feel heard. Have I been able to understand where you're coming from?
Yes. You're understanding our frustration, for sure, for listening to us and knowing that it's basically been like hitting a wall, just trying to keep moving forward, and it just can't. We can't get past the first step, and it's been frustrating.
Yeah, I bet.
Because when you talk to somebody and they're like, there's nothing they can do, that's that, that's just how it is, and it's like, okay, so.
Well, we can do some
Which
things.
is actually why I'm glad you reached out and said, you're willing to help and move forward.
Yeah, and I think, that doesn't mean I won't challenge you.
No, that's fine, but
But it does mean you found that out.
It's not just like, no, and it's like, okay.
But I'm not going to just throw up a wall.
No.
We have to have a dialogue and try and figure it out. And part of it is again, my presumption is that the Holy Spirit is at work. What did our Lord say? Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, I am in the midst of them. So, this is not to end in frustration. That's not the way this is supposed to work out. So if you're willing to work with me on it, I will do my best to try and make sure we get where we need to go.
Do you want us to email you? Call? Set up appointments somehow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for we've got still 4 people left online. They navigated this. Well done.
We're going to hear from those people.
They'd be like, what the hell? I saw a couple of things post I saw a couple of things come up like, you're going down another rabbit hole. But what I would say is, I think the easiest thing to be, because I'm limited I'm limited
Which I understand, like I
in
said,
terms
I-
of like my own ability,
Yeah.
especially I get so many emails and my worst fear is that I'm gonna drop the ball and not get back to you. When I got all these 20 different, I was like, oh gosh, because I worry that I'm gonna drop the ball and then it's gonna be another disappointment. So like that's the last thing that I want. I think the best thing in terms of making sure that we move forward and that nothing gets dropped is I'm much better in terms of just phone conversations because emails get
Well, I got
lost.
your email,
That's
but
the
your
devil
phone
at work,
number
is
was.
the internet.
Oh, I
Your
hate
phone number,
email.
so
It's
if
just
you
the bane of my
write-
existence.
It wouldn't accept, my phone wouldn't accept your phone number because I don't know where.
Oh, really?
It said it was calling from, yeah, you know.
So if I would say that a phone conversation is the best because part of it is also, especially with some of these conversations that are a little bit more complicated, we'll end up sending 89 million emails back and forth to try and nail things down. It's much easier to nail things down in a conversation where we can have give and take. So I think that's the easiest thing. I've reached out and tried calling a good chunk of the people on my list, and I've talked to some of them, but I would say that if you are able to take the initiative to call me, that will go a long way. I don't like putting that on you, the burden on you. I will try. Let me make sure that I write down.
Yeah, because it
And
was
just
like
get-
a Bangor number, so it like kicks.
Yeah, it's
it kicks you into, like,
217.
this
It is a
block-
Bangor number, you're right.
This blocked field.
From when I
like,
was,
no.
when I was the pretty stuff in Bangor.
It's like
um,
state numbers, if it doesn't recognize it, it like goes right into.
Of course,
like,
there's
this-
no paper.
yeah.
What I would say, I'll tell you, I'll get your addresses on the way out. And then if you're online, well, let me just give you my phone number. My cell phone is 207-217-4392.
207-217-4392.
4392, yep. And what I would say is, it sounds like some of you have already been in touch with Prince of Peace Parish. So the biggest piece there is just navigating that with Lisa. I just talked to her earlier, and I know Lisa, pretty well. So part of it is to try and work with her and try and advocate for families here and make sure we try and kind of move things forward. As far as the time frame, I think it would be really good if we were able to have, there are a number of students who need to be baptized. And I think it would be good if we could try and make that happen sometime during this Easter season. So that would be, the requirement for preparation for baptism is when they're younger, they're really not, you're really the one taking on the responsibility. So whereas for First Communion Confirmation, we do the preparation in the first and second grade with them, and there are a couple things that you do with them as parents, but a good chunk of their preparation happens with them. But for baptism, it's really more your own initiative and the godparent. So although to the godparent to a lesser degree, it's really more you as the parent. So insofar as you're willing to I think even just being here, you're showing that this is something you care about and you're willing to make some commitments about. And so that, I think, I don't want to rush things, but I would say,
Rush it. Rush it, but waiting
taking this long?
Well, but part of this too is with godparents in particular.
When they're doing this like in the fall for the next step.
So I think,
They're going towards second grade now.
right. So I would say, like, by the end of the school year, I think we would want to try and shoot for, and I would suggest it would be nice to try and do some kind of a mass where we had those St. Dom's kids that, so it'd be nice to do it as a little community, so some of the families who know each other, and the kids who know each other could have this experience together. I think that would be special for them, and I think it would be good. So that might mean that we would like look at a particular, like this weekend, the 10:30 Mass at the Basilica, I'm covering for Father Patrick. So that Mass, I'm doing the baptisms right after that Mass of the 2 students that we have. You might come, and you can see what that is like.
Are we doing this weekend?
In fact, I had talked to Lisa about this weekend, but I think it's just too quick of a turnaround. But I think we could look, within a month or two. Some of this has to do with just getting things sorted out in the parish. We've got to get that all sorted out because ultimately they document the sacraments, so we got to make sure we get all of that sorted out.
So did they do it right in the mass now?
After usually,
And would
or
it
you
be
can do it
okay
during.
for us to stay? I don't know if is that like a private thing? I mean.
Oh, to stay after?
Yeah. to
Yeah, of
watch
course you-
baptism.
yes.
I don't know.
No, you.
See, and that's the thing, like, with my oldest, it was just like our family.
Right, and that's the way I
it's
see
just
it. That's
our
why I'm
family
like,
background.
I feel like
And,
that's
and like you have
important,
it, and they scheduled it, no, just this one family, and that was it.
No,
And they
no,
scheduled
no,
something
no,
else
no.
so that it was all
to be able
private.
to see.
And
that
You
that's
should
what
come.
I
I'm
would
serious. You
rather
should-
her be-
you should come
her
to the
and her be
10:30
baptized
Mass
with their
and-
friends.
Yeah.
For them
You should come to
see.
the 10:30 Mass and stay after, and you can see a couple kids get baptized, and you can encourage them, and maybe they'll come in however long it is. And I think, yeah, we're supposed to be doing this together.
I would
like
rather they all be together. too,
I agree. So I think,
you know?
no,
Whatever
I
Sunday
think.
works for you guys.
Make a weekend, sign us up.
Well, let's work on it. And there are some others. What I would say too, you probably know some other. I don't know. There are parents who I assume.
I think Levi's.
There are some others I know we've got on my list. There are others. So I think we need to look at a weekend. We need to. Yep, I get. There's somebody who's interested in a community match.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I think we need to work on that. And then the other piece is just making sure that they're lined up also to, if they're already in second grade, they're receiving their preparation in the school, but they need to stay connected with the parish so that they're signed up for First Communion confirmation. So that's another piece too, is to make sure that connection happens. And part of this is whatever we can do to just try and I think I don't know if you've met Father Dan Greenleaf, he's the pastor here in Lewiston. I think he would love to sit down and talk with a group of parents that are trying to connect more with the parish. I think, I would just encourage you to give it another shot. And,
Well, I know it was just Everett and I Palm Sunday. We were here, and he was like the only child.
I know,
He
it's
was a
hard.
little disappointed.
I remember
But,
being,
and I don't remember actually who did the service. It was long. But
I think-
45 minutes in, he was
I think
like-
you're right. I mean, I think part of it is you might try. So the masses that tend to be a little younger, the 10:30 at the Basilica is probably the most family full mass. Believe it or not. There are also some families that come to the 5 o'clock on Sunday evening at Holy Family. That tends to be kind of the mass of last resort.
So the one this weekend that's here.
The 10:30 is at the Basilica.
The St. Peter and Paul?
Yep.
Okay.
And that mass tends to have a lot of kids. My brother and sister and their kids all go there. So that's 11 kids. So that's a few. But you know, I think I would just, you know, I know it's not a particularly easy time to practice your faith, especially for our generation. It's not just the kids that don't have peers in the pews. We don't either. Most people in the pews are not in their 30s and 40s. They're quite a bit older. But I'm absolutely convinced that now more than ever, our culture needs God. And our families do. You know, the number of marriages that are struggling right now, and I hear from, and you know, too often we wait until people are in just complete crisis. So I think it's not easy, but it's worth it. And I think if we can invest, if we can just as a group say, this is important, let's make an investment, then we can all support each other. So let's see what we can do. See what we can do. Are there any questions that that haven't come up? I mean, we can talk, you know, individually too, but yeah.
Last weekend there was a parents meeting for baptism at Holy Family, and I think the schedule is like one Sunday a month, but I think we have to do that before. So if the next one.
There's a parents meeting for
baptizing your kids.
So I don't know. So some of that is
Through the parish. I got the schedule from Lisa, and we didn't go last weekend because we don't yet have godparents. But I think it was like, there's one in May,
one every
in
month.
June.
So what I think might work best. Okay, let's see. Next step for a baptized kindergartner, sign up for religion education. Sorry, I just lost the chat. There it is. Let's see. So as far as if the child is already baptized, then really it's just a matter of being to connect with the parish. If your child is already baptized, connect with your parish, and then we do sacramental preparation in 1st and 2nd grade, and then they would basically, as long and make sure you're connected with whatever parish it is, and that they know that your child is preparing to receive First Communion confirmation. It would be fall of the 3rd grade years when Lewiston Auburn receives First Communion confirmation. So I think, yeah, after a kid's baptized, it gets a little easier. So we just need to get the baptism thing worked out. But I think after I think it's because there will be some, I don't know exactly, there are probably some retreats with the parish that will be so you'll be asked to be a part of. And, you know, part of that I would say too is I would just encourage all of you to try and find some place to connect with the Catholic community here in Lewiston Auburn other than the school. See if you can't. Part of it is, I would say, the Catholic community in this town needs you. Like, even with your questions and frustrations. Okay?
Some things haven't changed since I was in CCD, so.
That's absolutely fine, but like, we need you to be, just to be, not anything in particular, but just there. And I also think you'll find that
So
it's
it's
a
first
positive.
communion confirmation, you're saying it like it's one
it is.
thing, so it's been
It
combined?
is now, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, there's been
Change?
a change.
Yeah, that's.
Fancy that.
I'm doing things.
Some things do
earlier
change.
now, but,
So the change was that the order, so confirmation used to be, we used to wait until
Right,
high school.
I had 10th grade. and
Right, so did I.
That did last a long time.
I just didn't,
So that has now
So
been
what's in first grade then?
nothing.
They just start.
But they
like,
start their
do
preparation in
retreats.
first grade.
They do some retreats.
Okay.
and stuff
And then
like that.
second grade they continue. And then the fall of third grade, they're confirmed and receive their first.
But in order to go to the retreats and things like that, there needs.
You want to be connected and just
To be baptized.
sign up with the parish, basically.
The baptism one
Oh.
was online
Yep.
and the reconciliation one was in person, but we.
Is
would-
it online?
Yes. It's all on the parish website now. The baptism one is like its own section and they watch some videos.
It's really not.
Yeah, I mean, we've done everything.
I would say that we have
other than
actually,
the
with our hour and 40 minutes here, we have spent more time and effort than you'll need to spend with any baptismal preparation probably. So, which is good. I'm not saying this is bad at all. I'm really glad actually that we've taken the time we have.
You
Hopefully.
should apologize to the people in the chat.
Yeah, sorry.
These kids are already baptized, so.
Yeah.
But look,
Just ours.
we need to sort these things out. This is not, it's important.
Sunday will be there.
We got to sort it out. So I think, yeah, I think the next, there are two things that I would suggest. One, try and reconnect with Lisa. I don't know where you are now in that whole process. It sounds though that like we got to figure out the godparent thing first. True?
Sure.
Okay. So we have to just figure out the godparent thing with this, with all, and then it will be connect with Lisa. Then it will be, we got to just schedule a date.
And is Lisa the one, is she at St. Peter and Paul's, is that the one right behind there, is that where we went before?
So the big, you can't miss it. It's the big stone one.
Right, no, I know where St. Peter and Paul's is, but is that where Lisa is located?
No, Lisa's.
She's right here.
over here.
We did come here?
Yeah,
She's
Okay.
the parish
She has
office.
a better memory of.
The parish office. So all of the Catholic churches in Lewiston and Sabattis and Lisbon are all combined,
Right,
and the office for all of them is right here.
okay.
At Holy
So it
Cross.
was right here that we went.
Yep.
See, I just have a bad memory of locations of things. He's better at that.
So I think if you can, you want to connect, yeah, if you haven't, and I guess part of it for me is like, with each, I have no problem like going through the list with Lisa and saying, okay, where's this family at? How do we figure this out? I think the main thing would be like trying to find out, and if I can help just navigate as far as, okay, which people are going to be able to work as godparents, and let's try and make sure we don't get hung up on that, and then move forward.
And you said they just, I'm just trying to be easy. They just need one now?
They've only needed one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think now there can be a second what's called Christian witness.
To make it easier, they need this done.
I think, look, but I would say this, Christian witness is someone who's a Christian, it doesn't have to be a Catholic, okay, who can also, again, if it's somebody who you think really would be a good influence in terms of their faith on your kid. But I don't know, this whole discussion about godparents is so fraught with, it's just challenging. And I don't want to, I just feel like I can insult you in 5 ways without even trying, which is not what I want to do. So So, I mean,
I appreciate you speaking with us. I definitely have felt like you've listened to us and that you've.
I hope so. So look, I mean, there are certain things I think we can figure it out though, I really do. And I think it's important.
And you said we would be able to get them all together for one mass and have.
I think we
all
can do
class
that.
afterwards?
Yeah. I think that would be super fun. Maybe we could get Mrs. Stevenson and some of the teachers and like, it would be fun to just, like our school this should be something we are celebrating.
Can their younger siblings also be baptized in the same mass?
Okay.
So,
I got 4.
Yep. Yep, we would do everybody.
great.
Okay.
Did you find a piece of paper?
Well, let's find one maybe in the office on my way out. For those who are online,
Thank you.
thanks for being patient.
Thank you.
And also, if you rewind, if you didn't get it, my cell phone number's on here somewhere. 207-217-4392. And give me a call. I kind of like, just think of me as your like Catholic coach, like trying to help you navigate this whole thing. Because I don't want you to get stuck. And we'll move forward. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, well, I appreciate your patience too. And if I've said anything that has been insulting or problematic,
Please forgive me.
yeah, please forgive me and take it with a grain of salt. Have a good night, everybody. Do that. Okay.